I was introduced to Tyler about, I think, right at the start of this year. Tyler Hankey works or is the founder of Ziptility. He formerly worked in co-working, but we brought him into the water sector. If we go to the next slide, next slide. And next slide. And I will let him introduce himself and his panelists, i.e. his customer and investor. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much, Kelly, and to the organizers. And thank you to Terry and Neil. So Terry is with IU Ventures. She and her team were our lead investors in our seed round. And Neil was one of our first class 4 which for us at the time was a large customer ever, and he's worked really, really closely with us ever since. Terry, if you want to take just a couple seconds to introduce you and your fund, Neil, you and I can dive into Anderson towards the latter half of the presentation.
Thanks, Tyler. And it's nice to be part of this, and I appreciate what this group is doing on this conference over the last couple of days. IU Ventures is an Indiana University affiliated venture fund. In fact, we manage 2 funds and an angel network, and we invest in opportunities that are led by Indiana University founders or are companies that are developing technologies coming out of IU. And both the chairman of Ziptility and the data scientist co-founder are alums of IU. But we're really happy to be part of this, and I'm looking forward to talking more about what we're up to. Thanks.
Can we potentially go back one slide to the service line leak example? Perfect. So everybody here knows that utility work is complicated. It's very important work being done by very different people very quickly across a large geographical area. In a lot of cases, the information needed to work effectively through these processes is also either confidential or unavailable. Teams are often organized horizontally, which means that individuals with different responsibilities often have conflicting incentives. And so it can be really difficult to work efficiently. This here is an example of one of those workflows. It's complicated stuff and sure feels like a good opportunity for software. If you'd go to the next slide, please. But just to complicate things further, many of the software tools designed to help here just really aren't as effective as they should be. This software is often designed to be sold, not to be used. That means that it panders to the needs of IT teams who are tasked with something completely different than the operational ones. They're tasked with purchasing software that's more secure or more feature rich and often more integrated. Because of this, utilities often adopt powerful systems, but these are expensive and really difficult to use. When this happens, the communication gaps remain because field teams dismiss these systems and the external stakeholders, so engineers, developers, contractors, they're not able to participate in these large enterprise deployments. So in most cases, there are at least some paper processes that are left to fill in the gaps.
Great, and I want to stick on that topic of adoption, Tyler. Specifically, Neil, can you talk us through how software is adopted in Anderson?
Sure. Normally, when software is purchased through the city, it is initiated by IT or by an IT consultant, which is difficult for us as a utility because they don't always understand exactly what we need and how the software can meet our needs on a daily basis. And so you tend to get this long drawn out process of going through presentations, looking at it, and then you're halfway through it and you're like, oh man, this doesn't even we already need to shut this down because it's not going to fit, so, and it's understandable they wouldn't know, because we don't know about their business either, but at least I don't know about the IT business, but it just seems to take a long time to get to a point where you say, we really can't do this. And so you waste a lot of time and sometimes money, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, we see this a lot in the adoption side of things, which can complicate it. And sometimes there's also a lot of different people involved on the purchasing decision. Like, who in Anderson is involved in that decision? Is it multiple departments? Is it just you?
When it comes down to the actual purchasing, it could be software, it could be IT. If we're doing a citywide type, software implementation, or if it's multiple department implementation, it could be IT. And then, you go through the normal process. A lot of cities go through, you start with the department, and then you go to the Board of Works. Of course, the mayors and, kept up to speed on everything, but everything that's done is usually purchased through approval of the Board of Public Works.
Right. And Tyler, can you now kind of tell us a little bit about why is Ziptility different, and get into a little bit more of background there?
Yeah, great. Can we go to the next slide, please? Awesome. Ziptility is project management software that's designed for the way that utilities actually work. It's GIS and work management and communication and collaboration features in a single, easy to use, super flexible system. Our customers can create focused workspaces with only the specific people and information that they need to accomplish their shared goals within that project or process. Because we have workflow specific templates for utilities of different sizes, utility can be deployed really quickly, and in a lot of cases without any involvement from IT. It is also extremely flexible and designed field first, so there's usually no excuse for preserving any paper processes.
Great. And I mean, Terry, what was it about kind of this opportunity that was appealing to you and your team, other than just Tyler? But what about the technology?
Yeah, well, we were excited about the team and their determination to solve this problem, and they found an unmet need and were determined to find a software solution to it. So, but really, we saw potential for a bottom-up strategy that's worked in other SaaS sectors, and we thought it could work here. And the more we did our due diligence, and the more we did calls with potential customers, the more we grew to appreciate the customers, these smart, hardworking, conscientious utility operators who were really hungry for tools that could help them do their jobs better. They cared about their jobs. They want to do them well. And, this was a solution for them. So that's really what it was about, is we fell in love with the customers, and we thought that Ziptility had a good solution for them, and we wanted to participate in addressing that unmet need.
Great. And I'd imagine sometimes we hear from the investor perspective, oh, water industry is too slow moving. I'd love to hear from you. Like you said, you love these customers, but does the slow moving nature ever make you nervous, or were you actually understanding kind of why that happens and kind of the process?
Certainly trying to get to understand why those sales cycles are so long is important, and we've heard about a little bit of that in the earlier case study too. But I guess if we were really nervous about risk, we wouldn't be involved in early stage tech investing. And we also have noticed some other companies in kind of parallel sectors like construction, companies like Procore and others are getting very good traction. And we think that there's an opportunity to see similar traction with utilities. And because it is a tough sales cycle, you don't have a lot of companies piling on, and we thought there might be an arbitrage opportunity.
Ah, I love that. And Neil, question to you as well, like what about Ziptility's approach was useful to you?
Well, really, it was unlike any software company that I've dealt with in the past. I worked for American Water for 16 years, and we had a system there and had it for years that was just kind of sprung on us, and kind of like the same thing we talked about with the IT. You know, they all did the legwork and implemented it, and then, you know, like we had to deal with it in our individual systems. But this was a little more different. It was thankfully it was more of a back and forth between us and Ziptility, rather than just, you know, here's our program, here's our software, you know, good luck with with how it works, you know. And so I was very intrigued by how they wanted our how we saw the utility working with this software, than just, this is our software, you know, let's try to jam this into the small end of the Coke bottle, you know, and make it work. So it was good in that way, and worked well for us in that way.
Great. And Tyler, I mean, who are you really focused on? Is it small? Is it mid? Is it large? Can you take us through that process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this slide's a little bit self-serving, but Ziptility can be used differently by different organizations of different sizes, and may or may not be replaced, may or may not replace other software. So typically small utilities that have no sort of IT infrastructure use us for everything, because we're all in one and we're focused. It makes it really easy for them to start from scratch, and that's something that they've really enjoyed. Medium utilities, which is where we would classify Anderson and Neil's team, usually use us where IT is least active. So that's field processes that go sort of beyond asset management. That might be things like meter service or emergency response, or for planning at the supervisor level. Large utilities, they typically use us to manage folks that are working in their processes, but are not internal members of their team. So again, that's contractors, folks that are working on contract, are not able to be a part of their large enterprise deployments. We also have active pilots with 2 regional engineering firms here in Indiana. We're helping them collaborate with their customers on planning projects from afar, which has been a really exciting use case for us. Eventually, we want to help people work together across every part of every utility, but we're comfortable sort of finding our niche for now without getting in anybody else's way.
Great. And what's been kind of the traction that you've had on this?
Yeah, we have a slide on that too. We can run through that, but things are going really well. We have 29 customers, many of which are in Indiana, which is our home state. But we now have customers in, I believe, 5 others. We raised money less than a year ago, much in part thanks to Terry's team.
Great. And if we go to the next slide, I want to jump in a little bit more to this Anderson case study. Neil, tell us a bit more about your organization and kind of set the scene for us.
Okay. The city of Anderson is located about 45 miles northeast of Indianapolis. We have a population of around 60,000. We have 23,000 connections. For drinking water, my part of it's the drinking water utility. So we have about 34 employees in the water department. We're broken up into production, distribution, GIS, back office, and utility office. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we got. About 420 miles of water main. We have one very large customer, Nestle USA. So that's kind of unique. They use about 2.5 million gallons a day. So it's very challenging for us to kind of work that all out. But that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Great. Big customer. And Tyler, how did you guys meet?
Yeah, our story is not a whole lot different than Jamel mentioned earlier. I believe, Neil, and I'm not sure, probably wasn't quite as important to you as it was to us, so you might not remember all this, but I think you came by one of our booths at an Indiana Rural Water conference. I think we missed you. I know we missed you because I remember aggressively Googling and trying to figure out who the heck the Anderson guy was and how I was going to get a hold of you. I think we did during that conference. I don't believe we actually even met at the conference, but we connected later. He welcomed us to his office. We had a really good time. I think we had some pizza with him and his team. Also, like the Bruna team mentioned, we didn't really have everything figured out by the time we got to Anderson. They were a big customer for us. I remember nervously when Neil started talking about pricing, trying to encourage him to name his price. I think he did that, and I think we agreed that it was fair. It was a really good first meeting. We later got our butts kicked by their deployment too, but it's been a really fun relationship so far.
Great. And Neil, do you remember it the same way?
Yeah, it was funny. It's kind of like one of those old bits where, the people are walking down hallways and going indoors and missing each other every time they go in a door. They just miss them. That's kind of how the conference was. Every time I was on their board of directors, and so every time I had a free moment, I was running down there to try to catch them, and I'd miss them, or I'd miss them in the hall. And it was funny because our engineering consultant was next door to him in the exhibit hall, and so I knew them real well. And I said, "Hey, I need to talk to this guy," and we just kept missing each other. But it was kind of funny, and I'm glad we finally did get together because it's worked out very well for us.
Yeah, and let's dig into that. So if we go to the next slide, Neil, can you give us a little bit of that, like before and kind of why wasn't it working and kind of why were you shopping for another tool?
Uh-oh. Neil, did we lose you?
Looks like we might have lost him.
That's okay.
Tyler, why don't you tell us maybe about the before?
Sure. So they had a very complicated, very well-run manual system. So they had a big ERP system that they were using in the utility billing office to do a lot of their people management. They also had an SQL database and a really robust custom software solution that they'd been working on for years. And a GIS system in their GIS department. None of those systems were used in the field, and none of those systems worked very well with each other. So they had complicated paper processes that connected each of those nodes. This was new for us, but we'd done this kind of thing a lot before. And I remember feeling so stupid calling Neil, asking him the same questions over and over again, because they had a really robust and largely effective system, but it was very much manual and very much on paper. I know, what Neil told us and what we've seen since, sort of change since, is they had no visibility into their field processes because everything was done on paper. So Neil didn't know if guys were doing the work that they said that they were doing. And I think that started to become a problem because our first deployment was with his meter service team. They're working with customers, and that can be both expensive and just, not good for the organization's reputation. They also wasted a bunch of time driving back and forth from the office because all the work that they were given, his meter service team, I think they've got 4 or 5 people on staff at a time, was from the office. So they might get information from the office, but they had to go back to the office every time. And Anderson's big enough that was super inefficient. They also, from what we heard, would miss information a lot of the time. So they're dealing with folks who are, in a lot of cases not paying their bills, but should be. And so they'd go all the way out, realize that somebody wasn't home or that somebody had paid their bill. So they wasted a lot of trips. Also, this meter service team was they were the front lines for a lot of the data collection process for other sort of compliance and asset management related things. And since this was all done on paper, I think that a lot of his field team didn't necessarily understand the asks that they were being given and why some of the information on their service orders were relevant. So they'd come all the way back to the office, realize that that information was missing, and then either have to go back or make life a lot more difficult for his administrators.
Yep. And if we go to the next slide of after Tyler, you can kind of give us more of that picture, since we don't have Neil, like what were the big changes that were made and kind of what were the successes around that?
Yeah, so as far as we know, Anderson's meter service team no longer has any paper. So the process that we mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, you saw that there's a lot of information changing between a lot of different hands. Right now, all of that is being done digitally. It's so popular amongst their staff that they went live, I think a couple weeks before our official go live date, both to Neil and I's surprise, which was really fun for us. They also recently had a new staff member, and for more complicated deployments like this, we often expect to talk to those folks, but he was completely trained by other field staff members. They are using Ziptility mostly. Their first workspace is for their meter service team and process, but they now are experimenting with other workspaces for their GIS process, for their maintenance process, and their GIS and engineering teams plan to team up to work on a sort of a new construction workspace moving forward. Again, what that allows them to do is really keep work focused and have different views into this process for the folks that care. And then information can go back and forth between these workspaces really seamlessly. Like I said, meter service is where they've really gone head first so far, but they're starting to experiment with other processes and hope to have this across their entire organization within the quarter, which we're obviously super excited about. Also, all of this was done in the heart of COVID season. I think that our first training meeting with them, I wish Neil was here, but early April. So we were adjusting to working from home, but we're computer people and we're used to that. His team was also working from home. I know I used to joke with Neil because he has a very big, comfortable chair that became his desk for a couple months. But we were really proud of how well that went because we met these folks early on in the meeting that I spoke of earlier, but we haven't seen any of them since. And there are 22 people actively using Anderson's Ziptility deployment. And again, we've only met a few of them in person.
And do you see that as a trend for you guys, like as you move forward this year, that everything will really be much more virtual? And how are you kind of changing for that?
Absolutely. It's been easier than I think we originally expected. Folks are having to use Zoom and digital systems for other parts of their life too, and so they're good at it. That's always, though, been a big goal of ours. We're software people, and so we've really tried to borrow some of the best practices from other industries to make this stuff easy to use and easy to set up and easy to learn. So yes, that was always our goal. I would say that COVID, forced us to accelerate that goal or accelerate our progress on that goal. I do think, though, it's also made it a bit easier.
Yeah. And Terry, since we don't have Neil here, where do you want to see Ziptility go this next year and grow, and kind of what would be your ideal?
Well, we're looking forward to new use cases and also some strategic partnerships that'll help us evolve how we're going to scale. And so participating in things like this and the Imagine H2O program are really important to that. So, so we're looking forward to that, but in doing so, always keeping our customers at the center of things and making sure that they've got the tools they need to be successful.
Great. And then
forward motion and supporting these guys all the way.
Wonderful. And Tyler, how are you going to live up to those expectations, and kind of how can this group that's on this call here right now help you?
Yeah, I think I would just second everything that Terry said. You know, we love working with customers. And so what we really try to do is understand their problems and do everything we can to solve them. We have flexible software. We like to think that we have flexible minds. And so we're always looking for new people with new problems that we can work with. As far as growth and scale, we like to think that when we solve problems, people talk about us, and that does some of the work for us. But we are looking for what we call different nodes in the ecosystem to participate. So we're really excited about the pilots that we have with these engineering firms regionally and locally, but we're always looking for new partners. So if you are or know an engineering firm that wants to work more closely with your customers in essentially providing live as-built and things like asset management and capital improvement plans to your customers, we think we've got some really exciting technology that can make that a lot easier. And again, I'll just echo, of course, we're always looking for new customers too. And like Jamel said, you know, we're not a fit in every situation, but we love learning about people's problems. And so if nothing else, we'd love to have a conversation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Terry. Tyler, I'm going to ask you to stay on for 1 second, and Jamel. Since we only have 1 minute, and I know June said we are sticking to the schedule, and I'm going to stick to the schedule, how can people reach out to you? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, for me, that's probably email. My email is my first name, Tyler, Tyler, at ziptility.com, Ziptility.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyler. And Jamel?
Same way, Jamel at varunaiot.com. So that's JAMAIL at varunaiot.com. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining for this. I think I'm handing this back over to Scott, and I think we're maybe 1 minute early.
Kelly, fantastic job. Thank you very much. I'm not sure. I think it's very smooth. I'm not sure early or late. It's right on the money. Great job, Verena. Great job, Verena. Ziptility, you guys. Keep up the good work. You know, I love it when all the pieces come together and we get some new technologies employed and solutions for pain points and, you know, all that great stuff. So it's kind of what we're all about here. So let's see, now we're moving into a short break, just 10 minutes. I'd like to remind all of you to kind of stay, you know, keep in touch with the chat, use the Q&A portions, sign into our the Slack channels for our sponsors. All right, so we'll reconvene here in 10 minutes at exactly 12:10 when we'll introduce the panel on data-driven partnerships and outdoor water conservation. So please tune back in 10 minutes. Thank you.